This is Gemara Sanhedrin, Daf Yud Beis, and today's shir should be an incredible schos aliyas and neshama for Penina Bas Rav Dov Ber B'siyata D'Shmaya the Koyach HaTorah should bring the neshama of Penina Bas Rav Dov Ber to higher in place in Gan Eden Shalmeila, closer to the Kisei HaKavod B'siyata D'Shmaya as well. As the learning should be an incredible schos for Shalema for Tinoik ben Miriam Ahuva B'Seich Sha'ar Chayle Yisrael. We're holding on Yud Aleph Amid Beis. About 20 lines from the bottom at the two dots, says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan. Al Shloisha Aratzais Ma'arbin Es Hashana. There are three lands that we take into consideration in continuing the previous discussion when it comes to the late crops ripening. So there are three areas that we take into consideration when we discuss a potential Iber Hashana, when we discuss making a leap year. What are the three places? Yehuda, Ve'ever HaYarden, V'HaGalil. Yehuda, Aver HaYarden, and the Galil. Says the Gemara, Al Shtayin Mehen, on two of them Ma'abrin, Val Achas Mehen Ein Ma'abrin. If two of these three places are at risk to have a late crop, so we create an Iber Shana, we add in a month of Adar. But for one of those places, we do not. But says the Gemara, Bisman Yehuda Achas Mehen, then Hakol Semechen. Why? She'ein Omer Ba Ella Me Yehuda. If Yehuda is one of the two places in which there is this concern of the late crop, and therefore we create an Iber Shana, says the Gemara, everyone is happy. Why? Because then you can fulfill the mitzvah of the carbon Omer, because that is where the wheat for the carbon Omer came from, and therefore everyone will be happy that the mitzvah is done in the most appropriate fashion. Tanu Rabbanan continues the Gemara discussing the precise procedure of the Iber Shana. Says the Gemara, in Ma'abrin es Hashanim Ella Yehuda. Where is the Bezdin held? Only in Yehuda. Vat ve'im Ibra beGalil. If you didn't Galil Meuberes, then it is indeed a leap year. Heir Chanani Yishainai. Chanani Yishainai testified that what? In Ibra beGalil, that if they did such in Galil, Einai Meuberes. So he said it works in Yehuda, but not in Galil. Says the Gemara, Amrav Yehuda Breder of Shimon Vazi. My time with the Chanani Yishainai. What is the reason why, if it's done in Yehuda, does Chananya hold? Excuse me. Ibrua beGalil Eina Meuberes. Why is only work in Yehuda nowhere else? Explains the Gemara. Amar Kra says the Torah l'shichmai sidrushu vasa shama. From there we learn out called Risha. Shata Dirish ella b'shchanai shel makayim. B'shichnai shel makayim has to be in a place that is referred to as the Shichnai shel makayim, Hashem's dwelling place. And we go to the bottom Rashi, 3 lines to the bottom, and Rashi explains Yerushalayim, of course, such is Hashem's dwelling place. Vihu Yehuda, which is in the portion of Yehuda. Continues the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan. So now that we know where you are Ma'aber the year, Now, at what time of day? Says the Gemara, 10 lines to the bottom. The first one line is Tanu Rabbanan. Ein Ma'aber es Hashana Ella B'yoyim. It must be done during the day, but if you did it at night, says the Gemara, Eina Meuberes, it does not work. Similarly, continues the Gemara, you're only allowed to perform Kiddush HaChodesh by day, but in Kichua B'layla as well, Eina Mekudesh. So Amar Rav Abba Maikra, where do we learn this out from? Says the Gemara, Teku B'Chodesh Shofar, B'Kaseh L'Yom Chagenu. And the Gemara darshins that the month is covered in it. Have Yomer Zeh Rosh Hashanah. Uksev, and the Torah says that is a chayk, a decree for Klal Yisrael, a judgment day for Yaakov. And from here we learn out Ma'amisha B'Yoyim of Kiddush HaChodesh B'Yoyim. So a bit of a long-winded brayso, long-winded makar, but says the Gemara, this is where we learn that the Kiddush HaChodesh, has to be done solely and only by day. Continues the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan im Ma'abrin es Hashana b'shnei re'avoin. We turn over to Yud Beis and Aleph, and says the Gemara, another caveat as to when you are allowed and not allowed from creating an Iber Shana. Says the Gemara, ein Ma'abrin es Hashana. We do not create a leap year when? B'shnei Ravain. In years of famine, and the top Rashi speaks out, because you have to eat from the new crop, so the extra month of the year will be disastrous. Tanya, we learned in a rice. Rabbi Aimer teaches Rabbi Vishma Bibala Shalisha. And a guy comes from Baal Shalisha, and he brings to the man of God Lechem Bikurim, bread of Bikurim Esrim, Lechem Soirim, 20 loaves of barley bread. So says the Gemara, Ve'ein Lecha. Israel. Now there's no area in all of Eretz Yisrael that what levashal beiraisel yeser mi Baal Shlisha. This place that's upon discussion in this pasuk, Baal Shalisha is the quickest area to ripen the crops, and still says the Gemara afal pikein loy bachra. And even with that ideal that Baal Shalisha has the quickest ripening everywhere, still only one species had ripened by Pesach. Shema Tamer, maybe you'll tell me Chitin, Tamalaymar, Sairin. Shema Tamer, Lefnei Oimer, Tamalaymar. Ten Lam Yechlu Achar Hoimer. Hoimer Meat Achaimer. Hoya. That it was after the Oimer. So once we prove that the crop is running late that year, concludes the Gemara Emer Meata. Ruya Isa Shana. Shetit Aber, really that year was fitting to become a leap year. But still, Mibnei Ma, what is the reason? Lo Yibra. What's the reason? Lo Yibra Lisha. Lisha did not create the leap year because Sheshnas Bat Sayris Hoisa. It was a year of hunger. Vayakol Aratzin Labeis Agranais. And what would happen? Everyone running to the threshing floor for foods. So from here we see a raya to that which we just said, that B'davka B'shnei Ravain, in years of famine, we would not create a leap year. Continues the Gemara Tanu Rabban. So another caveat, when you would and would not. Now we go to the opposite bookend. How early in a year can you determine that the year will be an Iber Shana? Tanu Rabban, number 12 lines down, the first one in line is Hagranois. Ein ma'abernes Hashana lefnei Rosh Hashana. Before Rosh Hashanah, we cannot determine it's going to be a leap year. Vavim ruah. Guess what? Ein milberes. Aval, however, if there's an urgency, you'll have to do it immediately after Rosh Hashanah. Vaval bikin, and still ein ma'avrin ella adar. So a fascinating entity. Even though, well, for us it's not so fascinating because we know that leap years we know years in advance, and it's still only Adar. But says the Gemara, and as much as you're able to create this leap year as early as right after Rosh Hashanah, still Adar is the month that is doubled up. Asks the Gemara, is that Shuvah Shachalei the Rava? But they sent the Rava Zugaba. Mirakas utfasoy nesher. A pair is returning from a place called Rakas, and an eagle captured it. To be Adam Devarim Hana Sebelus, and their hand holding things that were made in laws. Umaynihu. And what are these items? Tchelas. Continues the Gemara B'schos Rachamim U'B'schusam Yatzu B'Shalim. The merit of Rachamim of Hashem and their own merit, this pair left captivity in peace. And the officers who issued from Nachshain, Bikshu, Likvaya, Nitziv, they wanted to appoint Nitziv Echad, one officer. But a certain lazy person, did not allow them. However, but still the Bali Asufais gathered together, and they created one officer. B'yarach shemis by Aaron HaKoyin, in the month in which Aaron HaKoyin died. So what do we see? We see that when it is Ishas HaTchak, they were allowed to create this Iber month even before Rosh Hashanah, asked the Gemara. But we just said it has to only be done after Rosh Hashanah. Answers the Gemara. Yes, they calculated it, but they did not properly announce it and reveal that they're going to be making a leap year until after Rosh Hashanah. My Masha, where do we know this from? The Hay Nitziv Lishta Diarchu. How do we know that when the pasuk says to create a Nitziv, an officer, that means to create a leap month? Says the Gemara, the Chsiv says the pasuk l'shloim, Moshe Masa Nitzivim al Kol Yisrael. Shloim HaMelech had 12 Nitzivim for Klal Yisrael, v'kilkelu es HaMelech, v'es Hanashim Chodesh V'Hashana. They provided food for each 1 month per year. V'Chsiv, it asked the Gemara, Nitziv Echad Asher Baris. But the pasuk seems to indicate that it was indeed an officer. And how long was it per year and not per 12 months? Answers the Gemara, Rav Yehuda v'Rav Nachman Chanamer Echad Me'moin al Kulam Chadaimer Keneged Chodesh Ibar. Two different ways that potentially the different nitzivim, the different officers were created, whether it was one and all or it was one per month. Continues the Gemara that teaches us how early you could create the leap month. Tana Rabbanan, about 20 lines to the bottom. The first line is Chodesh Ibar. Continues the Braisa, Ein Ma'abernes Hashana Loi Mishana Lechavert. You cannot create a leap year from 1 year to the next. And similarly says the Gemara, and you cannot have 3 consecutive leap years. Rav Shimon Meizer Rabbi Akiva Shechavish Beis Asurim. Rabbi Akiva is in jail for Iver Shalosh Shanim Zu Achar Zu. Amar Loi Misham Raya. Being a raya from there, Bezdin Yashu V'Kavu. Achas Bismana. It wasn't that they created an entity, a block of time, that there's going to be 3 leap years. No, says the Gemara, it happened to have been one after the next, and then it is allowed. So in order, one more time, V'kavu achas bismana, in its time, doesn't mean they actually had 3 years in a row. It means that Rav Akiva calculated when the next 3 leap years would be, but it's not pshat, says the Gemara, that they were actually one after the other. Tanu Rabbanon, it says the Gemara, and we move along from the Iber month into the year of Shemitah. In Ma'abenes Hashana Loi B'Shviyas, you're not allowed to have a leap month in Shemitah. Loi B'Motzai Shviyas. Emasai, says the Gemara, Regilun La'aber, when would they normally do it? Erev Shviyas. Shall be Rabbi Gamliel Lema Avrim b'Motzai Shviyas. Ubloik the Dani tonight's v'chliks tonight. The Tani learned in a Braisa. Ein maybe in Yarek mechutz la'aretz. You're not allowed to bring vegetables from chutz la'aretz. Ever say no itiruah, and they allowed it. So my benayu. So what exactly is the machlekes? I'm Rabbi Yirmiyah Chayshan legoy sheshet legoy shehan ika benayu. The machlekes is, are we chayshesh legoy shehan for clods of earth that it might have been attached to the produce? That is the machlekes. Tanakama is worried about it, and therefore those clods of earth will spread tumah into Eretz Yisrael, and that's the reason why he says you're not allowed to bring anything into Eretz Yisrael. The Rabbanan, however, disagree and say you could bring it into Eretz Yisrael. Tanu Rabbanan continues the Gemara, 8 lines to the bottom. Tumah is not a reason that if they're worried that the people will not have time to eat Matar before Pesach, before their Oila Regal, that is not a reason to Yimabra the month. Rabbi Yehuda Imer Mavit. Rabbi Yehuda Meizim Chizkiya Mel Yehuda Shiva Zashanim De'atom Obikesh Rachamim Alatzmai. So Chizkiya indeed did such. Obicha Rachamim Alatzmai, and he davened to Hashem to have mercy, to forgive him because it was incorrect. Tersev Ki Merabim Ma'an, as the pasuk says, Ki Marbis Am Rabbas Me'afrai Menashi Yisachar Zvulon Lo Yihita Ruah. A lot of people from Ray Menashi Yisachar Zvulon, and they did not purify themselves. And we turn over to Yud Beis and Beis as we continue quoting the psukim, in which we see that he was Ma'aber the month, but Dafka specifically because of this Tumah, which we're saying right now, was incorrect. Continues the pasuk in Yud Beis and Beis, Ki Achlu Zapesach V'loi Kakosov. They ate the Karban Pesach otherwise than is written. Ki Yispalu Chizkiyo Aleim Lemar Hashem Atay V'Chaper Ba'ad, that Hashem should be Mechaper. Reb Shimon Aimer says, Reb Shimon Ne'atoma Ebruah Me'ubaris. Says Reb Shimon, let's say Lamaisi you did it. You shouldn't have. But let's say you were Ma'aber the month because of Toma. It works. So why in those psukim do they daven on themselves? Adar. The reason is you're only supposed to be Ma'aber Adar V'hun. What do? Ibor Nisan. Be Nisan. They add on Nisan. Rav Shimon Yehuda Aimer, Rav Shimon, he sees Israel, Lasa is Pesach Sheni. Why? The problem that they did, the reason that they were davening, that they wanted to have kapara, was because he told them to observe inappropriately Pesach Sheni. Continues the Gemara at the 2 dots, 12 lines down. Amar Mar. Continues the Gemara of Yehuda Aimer Ma'abrin. Says Rav Yehuda, you could be Ma'abr a month because of Tama. This is the aforementioned machlokes whether Tama is enough of a reason to be Ma'abr or not. Says Rav Yehuda, yes. Alma, what do we see? So says the Gemara, let's pin this machlokes on a different machlokes. Why do we view Tama? Says Rav Yehuda, Tama is pushed aside when it's a Tama b'tzibur. A lot of people are Tame. Asks the Gemara, but wait, this is a steer in Rav Yehuda. The tzitz, whether Kohen Gadol is wearing it or not, when the carbon becomes Tame, it makes no difference. It is miratz. Different Rabbi Shimon. Rav Yehuda Aimer, Oidala mitzcha, he's wearing the tzitz miratz. Ino mitzcha, ino mitzcha. Oh, really, Rabbi Shimon Kohen Gadol v'Yom Kippurim yoichiach. I'll bring you a raya for the Gadol and Yom Kippur. That what? Sheino mitzcha. Of course, Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippur is wearing the big day lavan, so he's not wearing the tzitz, and yet miratz. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Hanach liyam Kippurim. Why? Why can't you bring a raya from Yom Kippur? Shetoma hotra b'tzibur. Because Yom Kippur Tama is to the Tzibur. So what do we see? We see a straight up steer in Rav Yehuda. We're quoting Rav Yehuda seemingly holding that what you could be ma'aber because of Tama. That seemingly holds Tama dechuya b'tzibur. We see Rav Yehuda as the opinion that holds Tama hotra b'tzibur. Throws the Gemara back. Let's ask a stira minei ubei. Rav Yehuda Aimer ma'aberin. Rav Yehuda ma'aser v'chizkiya melech Yehuda shivas hashana mea tamo b'gei shakmal ha'atzvai. So we see a stira. Does Rav Yehuda allow you to do because of Tama or not? So answers the Gemara, we have to add in some extra words. On that comes along Rav Yehuda, and on that Rav Yehuda comes along and he explains that is what they davened for, because they should not have done it. So in all the braces Rav Yehuda is holding that when it's involved in the community level, it's Ibor, Tuma is mutter. Ask the Gemara, wait, Yachi, if this is sure, if Shimon Omer, Tuma Ibrua Mubares, I know Tanikama, comes out there the same Shita. Difference is, should you do this initially, or that you did it, it works. Tanami Hachi Araya, Imam Rizashanim Neatoma Lechatchila, Rav Shimon Omer. So if he allows that this is enough for reason ma'aber the month, why do they daven for themselves? Shein ma'aber ella adar, vu ma'aber nisan b'nisan. The same conclusion that we had before. Amar Mar. One last piece of the Gemara says the Gemara shein ma'abrin ella adar. Says Mar, as we just quoted, only ma'aber adar. And what was the mistake that they made? Vu nisan b'nisan. Says the Gemara, wait, wait, did they learn out from Achodesh Hazel Lochem that there's only one Hazel, only one Nisan, you can't have multiples? Answers the Gemara in the last in our line, Tab in this Shmuel, Damar Shmuel, because teaches Shmuel Ein Ma'abrin. Moving on to the first line, as Ashana B'Yom Shleishim Shaladar, however, the Kavanisa, because it already can be Nisan. And that's why he did it. Because they could have been made a niece, and that's the detail that they argue upon. We'll pick it up from here.